what we're going to do now is start the basic dishing process. I place the dish, the elbow cup face down on the dish, pick up my rawhide hammer with the round face, and begin to hammer. What you've got here is just enough curve to get it ready for the next dish, which we'll take it over to now. I set it on the 2-inch deep dish. Take my slightly sharper hammer, but still a fairly broad-faced hammer, and I'm going to begin to hit it in a spiral motion, but not over the whole piece. Only over this basic center section, because that's where all the real dishing goes. I don't want to hit in the center as much as I do here, because otherwise we'll create too much of a thin spot. Now this metal is pretty thick. It is 14 gauge after all, so you don't have to be terribly careful. But I have made the pieces too thin, so do your best to be careful. After a while, you'll start to develop some ripples in the piece, which means you're stretching the piece more in one space than in others. All you need to do in order to take these ripples out is place the piece in the dish, take your hammer, and hit on the ripple. And the ripples go away. You'll be continually putting more and more of these ripples in. Don't worry about them. Take them out as soon as you start to notice them forming, and you'll be okay. Still only working the center section, and sometimes you'll find that the wing gets in your way. So just get it out of your way. And just bend it. Be careful not to bend it too much, or you'll wind up cracking the wing, but a little bending won't hurt anything. Remember to work the center section most heavily, and this section here doesn't need to be worked very much. In fact, I've overworked it, so I'll take some of this out and some of this out. But I really want to work on this section most heavily. Okay, you'll see now just how deep I've taken it. It's pretty deep. It's basically conforming to the inside contours of the piece. What I'll do in order to give it the pointed shape that it'll have is do that work over the ball. So what I do is I set it on the piece, and by the way, I'll only be hammering this much of it. This section up here, which I don't know if you can see it, but it's a slightly different color, will not actually sit on this, and I'll do that on another ball. So I'll only be hammering on this outside edge. Now what I'll do is strike it with the face parallel to the ball, like this. You don't have to hit very hard, and accuracy is more important than power. I'm working on the edges first, trying to take out the inconsistencies there. What I do, now that I've done both edges, is just pick a spot and start hammering it. Try to cover it with nice, even hammer blows to take out any inconsistencies. And if you do it right, you won't be putting new hammer marks in, you'll be taking out old ones. And you just keep working it like this until the piece is right. So, you can watch me for a little bit, then I'll come back with a slightly more progressed product. What I'm doing here by working this section is I dished it a little too deeply. What I'm trying to do now is remove some of that dishing. These two sides, instead of being curved like this, should be only slightly dished, almost flat. So I'm going to take some of that out. Now to a smaller ball stake. I've also taken and just quickly drawn an X representing the center point so I know where I'm working to. The piece is not symmetrical. You can see right now that there's a bulge here, and this side falls fairly sharply away. Same thing here. This side's higher than this side. So what I'm going to do is try to even all that out on this ball. And I'm going to do it in exactly the same way I did the other one, by hitting it on the ball. Sometimes when you have a bubble like this one that I want to move, I want to take this dishing and move it up here, I'm going to rest it on this part and hammer here so I can push it. And it won't sound like a normal one. When you hit it on the ball, it's a crisp sound. When you hit it above the ball, it's a hollow sound. So I'm going to work on the hollow spot right now. Try and push it someplace. And that was easy. When it's not resting on things, it goes very quickly. But you don't want to do too much of that because it tends to deform the metal too badly. So back to working on the ball. Before I move on to the ball stake that's pointed, I've moved to my mushroom or doorknob stake. It doesn't have much of a curve, which makes it really useful for flattening out areas that are too high. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, the piece is much more uniform in shape. That's a lot closer to where I want to be. I've moved now to the pointed ball stake. What I'm going to do is try to find the very center of the piece, which is where the X is, rest it on it so that it balances, and hammer very lightly, and you can tell if you're right on the money. And I'm not. So I move it over a touch, and now I'm pretty close. So from here, you work your way around, and be very careful not to put too much of a point in here, or you might make a hole. And that wouldn't be any fun. Very lightly, very carefully. Work the piece around until it gets the shape you want it. And I'll do some hammering on it. I'm trying not to create a sweep up, but simply a progression. So I'm often turning the piece at a weird angle so that it sits exactly on the ball, like this. Now that the piece is more or less to shape, I'm ready to start doing the wing. And there's this V in the wing that you're going to want to put in. What I do here is take my regular cross-peen hammer and begin to hammer in a line parallel to the V that I've drawn on the inside of the wing. I'm taking this piece and resting it with the center line running along the rounded edge of my anvil, starting with the round part so I don't wind up cracking it. I'll eventually move to the straight, crisp edges of my bighorn, but right now I want something nice and smooth. What I'm doing is I'm hammering with the piece resting somewhat less than flush with the anvil. So it's not sitting flush like this, it's sitting in a slight angle like this. And I'm going to start by hammering with my cross beam running in a line parallel to this line that I've drawn. Strike lightly and carefully and work your way from here to the center point and back out. And as you work towards the center line, you can tilt the piece at an even more extreme angle. Okay, after the first pass, I've developed sort of a little, I don't know what you'd call it, a V, I guess. And then I'll take the second pass and do exactly the same operation and keep on working on tilting the piece so that this becomes a more extreme V. Now we're ready to work it some more on the sharp, crisp angles of the bighorn. Okay, switch it over to the other side and work along the same general line. What I've developed is a sharp, angular crease. Now that's fine for this particular example, but sometimes you're going to want to round it because you want a more rounded appearance. In order to do that, you can simply put it over the rounded portion of your anvil, the horn, and just hammer it in round instead of square. So it's a fairly easy process. Now what I'm going to want to do is to sharpen up these angles. So I'm going to take a flat-faced hammer and hammer it like this, parallel, to make it much more exaggerated. All I have to do now is clean it up. I'll do the cleanup work by resting it here and hammering with a flat face again. Same thing here. Now that the piece has had a quick buffing, I'm ready to start putting the V's in the pook. They're marked on the pattern, and all I've done is simply taken a magic marker and drawn 4 little V's. One here, one here, one here, and one here. I'm going to take a hacksaw and make 4 straight triangular cuts into the piece and remove them. Doesn't take much. Okay, I've got a little V cut. Then what I'll do is take the file and make these V cuts rounded. And then I'll proceed along to the next one until they all look like this elbow cup's made. See, they're nice and round. There's one in the center. Okay. Once I've done that, the piece is ready to be articulated after a little bit more planishing. One thing you'll find when you do the polishing is that it reveals all the little facets that you've created. Each of these has to come out. So I'll do a little bit more planishing, do a little bit more polishing, and then I'll take the piece and be ready to articulate it. Now that your elbow cup is made, it's time to start on the vambrace. I take the painted side of this metal, since it's part of a barrel, place it down so it's the inside so it doesn't rust on me. And what I'm going to do is to work it around the rounded section of my bighorn. I'm using the flat face of my rawhide hammer and hitting lightly. Section of a cone, you're going to have to work more on the back edge than you will on the front edge. Just beat it around until it's more or less the way you want it. Like that. It's kind of to me. Okay, but it's a little loose at the wrist. I'm going to tighten it up. That's the easy part of it. Now the next part is to make it tulip shaped. The original piece doesn't simply go like this, it goes like this and out. I hold the piece tightly in this hand, pick up the hammer that I dropped, keeping it squeezed, using a raising hammer and striking this way along the rounded portion of my bighorn. I'm squeezing it as I go because the piece is going to want to get flat again. Now I move it up to a slightly wider part. And move the piece down. And you develop a more or less tulip-shaped vambrace. Now it's a little wide at the wrist, so I squeeze it, and it fits more or less like it's supposed to. So it's time to work on the next piece. Do more or less the same operation with the vambrace top. Place it on the bighorn and begin to form it into a tube. The top cap has a stronger, the top piece has a stronger flare than the bottom. So we're going to work a little bit more of it. Give it a few whacks from the outside with a flat face hammer. Okay, it's really beginning to take the shape that I want it to have. So we hammer it a little. We can't get them to fit. We have a snapshot of the piece. Experience the snapshot. And it looks basically right. So, what I next have to do is roll this back edge. Now what I'm going to do is make the roll for the back edge. Start by placing the top edge along a rounded portion of an anvil. I'm using my cross peen, or actually I'm using the straight peen edge, and just start to flare it slightly. Now that I have a basic lip formed, what I'm going to do is begin to roll it around onto itself. I'm going to turn the edge over on the undercut point of my bighorn. Okay, I'm going to continue turning this by simply hammering it down on the bighorn. What I'm doing is essentially closing this, and when I've got it closed enough, then I'll put a wire in it to keep it uniform. I've taken a bit of welding rod of a fairly good diameter and stuck it into the opening I've made. Now what I'm going to do is close it, hopefully, without letting the piece out. Now that the wire's in place, I've taken a hacksaw to cut off the extra bits as well as a short portion of the tube that I made, because this part has to sit under the other piece and it'll get in the way if it sits there. And the same thing on the other end. So what I'm going to do now is close the roll. I'm just tapping it closed. And at some point, I use a square-faced hammer to set it closed. We basically have the roll. It'll polish up pretty nicely, and that's all there is to it. Now what we have to do is make our lames curved to fit the rest of the arm harness. So you take it, lay it on the horn of your anvil, and just use your body weight. Then you just keep running it across the piece until it looks like it would be good for the piece. You might ask yourself, why 3 lames? Why not 2? 2 of the lames are designed for articulation, that is to say, this movement. However, The third lame does not articulate in that way. What it does is it is slotted and allow lateral movement. So our lames are basically done. Now what we have to do is continue the same sort of a vein with the rear brace. The rear brace is a little bit bigger a piece, so I'm probably going to use a hammer to form it with. And this piece is sort of formed. See how it fits to the lame before it. Seems to fit just fine. So it looks like the pieces are ready. As you can see, the whole second half of the piece goes much quicker than the first. All the pieces are now formed. All I have to do now is articulate them. Okay, what we have here is the secret to articulation. Take your lame, the way it fits, place it in the cup at its farthest articulated position, and mark the holes. Then move it to its closed position. Mark the holes. Find the middle point between the two holes that you made and make your hole there. That doesn't allow it to go any farther than it would normally go. I'm just going to use my punch. Well, by following the same process, I have articulated the three lames and the rear brace. All that's left now is to attach the van brace. The van brace should fit perfectly. It should be smooth and clean with no gaps. Because the van brace doesn't articulate this way, it turns in this way. I've marked the three holes and made them on both pieces. 1, 2, 3. What I now need to do is turn these into slots. And the slots will be about a ½ inch long each to allow lateral motion. There's a number of ways to make these slots. If you have a Roper Whitney punch, you can just punch a series of holes next to each other and then file them clean, which is how I'll do it. If you don't have a Roper Whitney punch, find the two ends of the hole that you're going to make, of the slot that you're going to make. Drill holes there. Take a little saber saw, a hacksaw, a jeweler's saw, and file out lines in between them. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to move over to the Roper Whitney punch and just make a bunch of holes in a line. Now made one slot. Well, now we have the three slots made. It's time to see if it works with the rest of the pieces. And the last one, put a bolt through, put a washer on it, and throw a nut on it. Okay, should allow us to have lateral movement in the arm as well as articulation. So we have this movement. We put the top part on the van brace. Get a rough idea of what the finished product will look like. It's rather like this. This lateral movement. The only things that are left to do are really minor. I have to file out the places where I made the punches so it's nice and smooth. I have to make a cutout for the hinge so that the van brace can open. And I have to polish the thing. Polishing the thing is the step that'll take the longest. I've gone back, taken it apart, I'm taking this piece, which is the lower van brace, and you notice how well it fits my arm, out of the piece. And I'm going to file these things so they're smooth. You notice how ragged they are. So I'm going to just run my file through it so that it's not going to catch the rivets. What I do need to do now is attach the hinge. I'll take a hinge, regular ordinary door hinge, and it will go on the inside at this position. What I'll do very carefully to mark the point is to lay it out and take a magic marker or fine point and draw the line around it on the cap plate, on the top plate. The hinge is laying so that the back edge of the hinge rests up against this line. The hinge will actually be on this plate, on the cap plate. There's no cutout made on the bottom plate. So what I'm going to do is mark and just sketch a line down across this line. I can take this piece apart, throw the other pieces away, not throw them away, but get rid of them. Draw a line down, and it's this section, this gray area here, that I'm going to remove. This simply tells me where the rivets will be and where all that placement is. What I need to do is cut this out, and that's not easy, especially if you drop your pen or pen cap. What I want to do is take a hacksaw, make a cut down along this line, do the same thing along this line, bend the piece outward, take a hacksaw and cut along flush. Lining it up with the bottom edge, tweaking it forward. Same thing, moving on down the line. It's a very fine-toothed file, one that'll provide a very smooth edge. We've got the piece resting on the horn of the anvil along the top surface. We take our flat-faced, polished hammer and tap lightly along this curled-up edge. Now that we're back, I've taken my hinge. It fits neatly in the hole. What I want to do is I want to make it slightly curved, so I'm putting it round side down over anything. I just happen to be using my vise because it's a solid space. Taking a raising hammer with a straight face and hammering it along the line very lightly of the holes. This should have a very slight curve. And that very slight curve is probably not something you're even able to see on the camera. But what it allows me to do is when I move over here to the arm harness, I can take the arm harness, and this will have the same curve as the inside. So I place it inside, and it all sits very nicely and neatly. What I need to do now is mark the holes. There we go. It opens and closes. You can now get your arm in without anything getting in your way. Now on the other side, there'll be a strap and buckle. The basic arm harness is now formed. It's time to take it apart, polish the thing to death, make sure all of these edges line up nice and straight so that we have a nice, clear, clean edge that's not going to be sharp. Take a file and file them all off. And once all that's been done, the piece is ready to be riveted together. Well, now that the pieces are all polished, we're ready for the riveting. All I'm doing in order to do the riveting is placing the two plates together with a rivet that I've trimmed. It's a little long, and I'm just going to peen it over. In order to peen, what I'm going to do is not just strike on the piece, but work my way around it. Turning the head into a mushroom. Now if you want to make sure that the round side of your rivet stays nice and round, you can do your riveting on a lead block. But for the purposes of this video, I don't think it's that important. Ideally, you would do that. Now the plates articulate. That's all we needed to do. When you're doing this, you have to be very careful not to hit the hinge, because you'll really mess it up. Okay, just barely tap that one over. And then do the same thing with the other one, just barely tap it over. Later on, I'll come through and tighten them down. But right now, I just want the piece held in place. I'm going to do the tapping with one of my ball stakes. And it's a tool that I use as a hammer sometimes. And sometimes I use it as a stake. You set it in the hardy hole and you can hammer on top of it. Well, here we go. I've put in all 6 rivets. It opens and closes very nicely. Next step is to attach the sliding rivets through the slots. So what I do is I take a rivet, put a washer on it. This is the only time when I'll be using washers. I just want to make sure that the rivet slides nicely, and a washer will help me in that. And I just absolutely barely tap the head. That's it. Even that might be a little too tight. Occasionally, things get a little tight. It just doesn't want to move pretty stiffly. So what I'm going to do, take a screwdriver and pry a little bit around the washer. That should help a little. Let's see if I can do it around all of them and make them work a little bit better. Works much better now. Here we are, ready to put on the next lane. Simply riveting just like before. Articulation is ready to go. The next step is to attach it to the cop. I'm going to go ahead and leave one side bolted while I rivet it. So I remove the nut, put in the rivet, and hammer it. That way, it doesn't change anything. And all that's left is to put the first 2 pieces we did onto the whole unit, which are sitting right here. Presuming they haven't changed in shape, they should go on rather easily. Take out the bolt, stick the rivet through. Lay it flat on the anvil. Clean it over. Voila! We have a Churburg arm harness with all of its features. The only thing that isn't on this that is on the original is brass edging. I've decided to omit the brass edging for the sake of the video, because it's certainly not something most people would do. But if you want to do it, it's really not all that difficult. It's simply taking the pattern pieces that you already have and figuring out what the edges look like, and then shaping them correctly. Well, here you go. One arm harness based on the one in Castle Churburg. If I can get my arm in. There'll be straps on this, and I think it works pretty well. Good luck. Try this project. I think you'll enjoy it, and happy armoring.